So Republican Senator Mike Lee had an absolute meltdown on Fox News today when he suggested that the Democratic effort to expand voting rights and protect voting rights was something only the devil could have come up with.
Everything about this bill is rotten to the core. This is a bill as if written in hell by the devil himself. This takes all sorts of decisions that the federal government really has no business making. And
so, again, I wasn't exaggerating there, guys. I wasn't, clickbaiting you there. He really does say that. He basically says that H.R. 1, the For the People Act, something that the House Democrats had just passed, and it's going to go to the Senate, is something that the devil himself drew up in hell. And you might think, oh God, this bill's really bad, guys. He's literally comparing it to like the prince of evil or whatever. But if you actually pause the screen that Fox had up, it's all reasonable, at least from my perspective. It says expanding mandatory voter registration nationwide. Perfectly reasonable. You should never have to worry about being registered to vote. You should be able to vote on the day of without having to worry. 18-year-olds should all be registered. Allowing people to vote without a photo ID. I agree with that. You should have a streamlined process for people with lots of identification. But here in Canada, we allow people to vote if they don't have photo ID with a sworn statement, and we don't have any issues of voter fraud or anything like that. Expand mail-in voting. Mail-in voting is good, and if you can give people as many options to vote as needed, we should do it. There was no case of irregularities in this election, despite the fact that millions and millions of people more than usual voted by mail. Giving voting rights to convicted felons. I agree with that. I think everyone, even people currently incarcerated, should be able to vote. But at the very least, once you've done your time, you should have your full rights of citizenship restored without any penalty. If you serve 5 years in an institution, when you get out, at the very least, you should have your right to vote again. And finally, D.C. getting statehood. I've talked about this tons. Lots of people have. The reason Republicans block this is because D.C. would probably more often than not just be an automatic 2 more Democratic senators. But let's be clear, it's also because it's a very, very heavily racialized and black in particular district. D.C. has more people than at least a couple states, and it's a very diverse, vibrant area. There is no argument to keep DC from being a state that isn't based on hatred and discrimination and pure partisanship from the Republicans. Now, luckily, everyone's been ripping him for this statement, and even MSNBC had some fun with it, and I want to play you this clip.
Jonathan Lemire, to just talk about where the Republican Party is, and those were some fascinating insights. And I mean, you go back and you read her article about CPAC, and you see Tom Cotton desperately trying to get the crowd going. And they're getting more and more extreme. And Mika, read this quote. Mika just found a quote that Mike Lee gave. And respond to this. This is, again, more cat in the hat stuff. Mika?
I mean, this is what he says of the For the People Act. This is a bill as if written in hell by the devil himself.
So Jonathan, they're saying that Satan drafted, Mike Lee is saying Satan drafted a bill that's meant to get more Americans involved in democracy.
That's an unlikely move for Lucifer, but we'll have to look into that. Joe, what we're seeing here, though, is a Republican Party that is grappling with its identity right now, where we're seeing their inability to hit on Biden because of resorting to culture war issues, this sort of civil war within the party, with the Trump side clearly right now winning, but yet those embracing the mantle of Trump are sort of frozen in place because they don't know what the former president's going to do, and they certainly can't suggest they want to edge him from the scene. And Trump has made clear to advisors, according to our reporting, he's in no rush to make a decision as to whether or not he actually will run again in 2024. And if the party keeps moving that much more to the right, yes, it's going to electrify its base, that sense of extremism on the fringes, but it's going to be harder and harder to win sort of national elections.
And so you can clearly see Morning Joe and the crew, Mika, they're all laughing at this statement, and rightfully so. It deserves to be mocked. It's that ridiculous. But the AP reporter there, Lemire, he really makes a good point, and it's something that the AP's written about, and it's something that we've been talking about on this channel, which is that the Republican Party in the era of Biden is really struggling. They are really struggling to get any sort of traction attacking Joe Biden. because Joe Biden is a fairly conventional conservative Democrat, right? And I don't see that necessarily as a good thing. And my viewership, which is probably to the left of the average American, doesn't necessarily see that as a good thing. But it does mean that when the Republicans are like, what can we criticize Joe Biden on from the right? They don't have a whole lot. His stimulus bill is pretty moderate and very popular. His approach has been fairly moderate and very popular. Republican voters have a decent approval rating of Joe Biden, and the population as a whole has a strong approval rating for Joe Biden. And so all they can do is, one, engage in the cultural war and cultural grievances, which is why we heard so much about Dr. Seuss, and why we've been hearing so much about cancel culture, and why we've been hearing so much about Biden's dogs, and why we've been hearing so much about all of these things that don't relate to Biden's actual policies or governance, right? And also, they hyperbolize. If there is something that's wrong, if they do feel something is amiss, they have to not only say, we disagree with Joe Biden, but this is literally a policy of the devil. Like, that's what they have to say. It's about Dr. Seuss somehow being canceled, even though he wasn't canceled. And it's about Biden and the Democrats literally being inspired by Satan himself. Like, that's what it's about. And so I want people to know that this is a party flailing. They don't know their identity. Are they Trump? Are they post-Trump? Are they, sort of Trump adjacent? Are they trying to be a Trump party, but without the Trump baggage? Are they about substantive good faith criticism of the governing policies? Or are they just about stoking their conservative base, getting them ready for 2022, trying to ignore policy because whenever they talk about policies, the policies are very popular. So keep an eye on this, because the Republican Party is having a real deal identity crisis. Really, they are. Like, there is things to criticize Biden on, but they're all from the left. Stimulus checks should be bigger. Minimum wage should be fought for harder. Student loan debt should be canceled. Migrant detention facilities should be closed quicker. All of these things are from the left, though. Watch the Republican Party. They have nothing, so all they have is culture war and lying.